Hey everyone, and welcome back. We've got another deep dive for you today.
Yay.
And this one, oh yeah, this one's for all you foodies out there. Get those grills ready because we're diving headfirst into the world of venison burgers.
We had a lot of requests to take a look at this one.
Yeah, you guys sent in some sources that go way beyond your typical recipe rundown. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of this, really explore it.
Right. We'll be taking a close look at an episode from the Fork and Fry podcast.
Oh, yeah?
They break down a pretty awesome sounding venison burger recipe, and they also get into some interesting discussions about nutrition and sustainability.
Interesting. I love that. I got to say, they sound pretty pumped about this recipe. They use some simple ingredients, venison obviously, and garlic, onion powder,
Yeah.
smoked paprika.
Yeah. They even debate the classic egg and breadcrumb question.
Oh, interesting. Before we get into all that, I got to ask,
Sure.
what about the venison itself? I know it's lean, but how does that actually affect cooking compared to, say, beef?
That's a great question. And actually, it's a key thing to understand if you want to cook venison right. See, venison has like a third of the fat that beef has.
Wow.
So it cooks way faster.
Okay,
You got to be careful or it'll dry out real quick.
that makes sense. So maybe those breadcrumbs aren't just optional. They actually help keep things juicy.
You got it. They bind the meat and add a bit of moisture. Now, Fork and Fry also mentions mixing the ingredients, which is where I think a lot of people kind of mess things up. They really emphasize mixing it gently, and there's a reason for that.
Okay, I am all ears. Why is overmixing such a burger killer?
Well, it's all about the gluten. When you mix ground meat, you're actually activating these proteins, and they form gluten strands.
Right.
And if you mix it too much, you create this really dense, tight structure. Makes the burger tough, chewy.
Ah, so it's kind of like kneading bread dough.
Yeah.
Too much, and you end up with a mouthful of work.
Exactly.
Speaking of technique, I remember Fork and Fry mentioned this cool trick, the dimple in the middle of the patty.
Yeah.
They said it stops the burger from puffing up on the grill.
Yeah.
But how does that work?
It's actually pretty simple. It's basic physics, really. When the burger cooks, the heat makes those proteins contract. That squeezes the juices out, and that's what makes the center bulge up.
Right, right.
So the dimple, it's like a little reservoir for the juices to go, helps the burger cook more evenly and stay nice and flat.
Genius.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've got our perfectly shaped patties. They're sizzling away on the grill. What about temperature? I mean, we want to make sure the venison is cooked through,
Right,
but we don't want to overdo it either.
for sure. Fork and Fry recommends 160 degrees Fahrenheit,
Okay.
which is perfect. Make sure the meat is safe but still nice and juicy. A meat thermometer is going to be your best friend in this process.
Absolutely. All right, now for the best part, toppings. Fork and Fry goes with the classics, lettuce, tomato, pickles. But they're all about getting creatives too,
Yeah.
which I love. Given that venison is so lean, are there any toppings that'll work particularly well?
That's a good point. Yeah, since venison is on the leaner side, you might want to add some toppings that give it a bit more richness and moisture,
Okay.
like avocado or a creamy sauce. Some caramelized onions would add some nice sweetness.
Oh man, you're making me hungry. Okay, but before we all run off to make burgers, let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the sustainability aspect. Fork and Fry talked about venison as a good alternative to beef. But can you break that down for us a bit more?
Absolutely. So when you source it responsibly, venison can actually be a more sustainable choice compared to like conventionally raised beef. It needs less land, less water, less feed, and it can actually be good for the ecosystem, like by helping control deer populations.
So it's not just about a tasty meal. It's about making thoughtful choices, thinking about where our food comes from.
Exactly.
That's something we can all get behind.
100%. And it actually brings up a pretty interesting question. How can exploring venison or other alternative protein sources, how can that fit into your own journey towards a more sustainable lifestyle?
I love that. That's a great thought. So there you have it. That was our deep dive into the world of venison burgers. From technique and taste to making conscious choices. Let us know if you try out the recipe. We'd love to hear about your culinary adventures. Until next time.
Happy grilling!